a wish for a child. I was a young man full of dreams, but my biggest dream was to be a father. My wife and I loved children. We wanted a baby more than anything. We waited for years, but nothing happened. Every month we hoped. Every month we were sad. Our house was quiet and our hearts were heavy. We visited doctors. We tried different treatments. We spent all our money on medicine and tests, but still no baby. I saw my wife cry many nights. I held her hand and said, "One day it will happen." But deep inside, I was losing hope. The years passed. We watched our friends have children. We smiled, but inside we were broken. We felt alone in our pain. One evening my wife looked at me and said, "Maybe we should stop trying." Her voice was soft, but her eyes were full of tears. I nodded, even though it hurt, and then something happened that changed everything. Life went on, but something was missing. My wife and I tried to be happy. We travelled, we worked, we laughed, but at night the house felt empty. We no longer visited doctors. We stopped counting days. We told ourselves, maybe this is our fate. But deep inside, we still wished for a miracle. One morning, my wife felt sick. She was tired and weak. "Maybe it's just a cold," she said. But days passed and she still felt the same. She went to the doctor. I waited at home, nervous and restless. After a few hours, she came back. Her eyes were wide and her hands were shaking. She looked at me and whispered, "I am pregnant." I could not believe it. "Say it again," I said. She smiled and tears ran down her face. "We are going to have a baby." I held her close. My heart was full of joy. After years of waiting, our dream was coming true. We were going to be parents, but we did not know that this journey would not be easy. The news of the baby filled our home with joy. My wife smiled more. I worked harder to prepare for our child. Life felt beautiful again. Every day we talked about the baby. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" my wife asked. "It doesn't matter," I said, "as long as the baby is healthy." We bought small clothes. We painted the baby's room. My wife read books about parenting. I dreamed of teaching my child how to walk, talk and play. But happiness does not last forever. One night, my wife felt a sharp pain. She held her stomach and cried. I rushed her to the hospital. The doctor examined her. His face was serious. "The baby is in danger," he said. "We must be careful." Fear filled my heart. We had waited so long for this baby. I prayed every night, hoping our child would be safe. Days passed slowly. My wife stayed in bed, resting. I stayed by her side, holding her hand. We were scared, but we did not lose hope. The fight for our baby had just begun. Days turned into weeks. My wife stayed in bed, weak but hopeful. I did everything for her, cooked food, cleaned the house, and read to her. She smiled, but I knew she was scared. The doctor told us to be patient. "Your baby is strong," he said, "but we must be careful." Every visit to the hospital made my heart race. I held my wife's hand tightly, afraid of bad news. One evening she whispered, "What if we lose the baby?" Her eyes filled with tears. I held her close. "We won't," I said. We have waited too long for this. Our baby will be born healthy." Months passed, and finally the time came. My wife screamed in pain. The hospital was bright and cold. Doctors rushed around us. I wanted to help, but all I could do was hold her hand. Hours passed. Then suddenly I heard a tiny cry. The doctor smiled. "Congratulations, you have a baby girl." Tears filled my eyes. I looked at my wife, exhausted but happy. She held our daughter in her arms. "She's beautiful," she whispered. I touched the baby's small fingers. She was real. After years of waiting, she was finally here. Our miracle. Holding our baby girl in my arms was the happiest moment of my life. She was so small, so perfect. Her tiny hands moved in the air, and her eyes, barely open, looked at me. I felt like the luckiest man in the world. My wife was tired but smiling. She watched as I rocked our daughter gently. "What should we name her?" she asked. We had talked about names before, but now, seeing her, we knew she needed a special name. "Hope," I said softly, "because she is our little hope." My wife nodded, tears in her eyes. "Hope," she repeated. It was the perfect name. The first few weeks were not easy. Our baby cried at night and we hardly slept, but we didn't care. Every time she smiled, our hearts melted. Every small sound she made was music to our ears. One evening, I sat by the window, holding Hope in my arms. The sky was full of stars. I thought about the years of waiting, the pain and the disappointment. Now all of that felt like a dream. Hope had filled our lives with light. I kissed her tiny forehead and whispered, "You are our miracle." Years passed, and Hope grew into a bright and happy child. She had my eyes and her mother's smile. Every morning she ran to me and hugged me tightly. "Good morning, Daddy," she would say with a big smile. Her laughter filled our home with joy. She loved playing in the garden. She would chase butterflies and pick flowers for her mother. Sometimes she would sit on my lap and listen to my stories. "Tell me again, Daddy," she would say, eyes full of wonder. She never got tired of hearing how much we had wished for her. Hope was curious and full of energy. She loved books, music, and dancing around the house. Every night before bed, she would hold my hand. "Thank you for loving me, Daddy," she would whisper. My heart melted every time. One day, as I watched her playing, I turned to my wife. "Can you believe it?" I asked. "She is here. She is real." My wife smiled and nodded. "She is our miracle," she said softly. Life had tested us. It had made us wait, cry, and almost give up. But in the end, life had given us the most precious gift. Now, as I sit here, old and grey, I look at Hope, now a woman with a family of her own. She holds my hand and smiles. "Daddy, you gave me the best life," she says. Tears fill my eyes. "No, my dear," I whisper. "You gave me the best life."